Listen very closely to this next phrase. What's loose is lost. What does this mean? What's not tied to anything will be lost. And this is by far the biggest problem I've seen when coaching speakers. Their information is way too loose. So how do you tighten it up? Here it is. Never give a point by itself. Never give a point by itself. Always accompany it with an anchor. Your message should be set up like so. Anchor and point. Then next anchor and point. Next anchor and point. What I find too many speakers doing is anchor, point, 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 point. Never give a point by itself. Always hang it on its own anchor. So what are anchors? They are whatever your audience can use to remember your point. The absolute best anchor, of course, is a story. Because when people remember your story, they remember your point. For example, remember the story about the boy who cried wolf? Even though it's probably been years since you've heard that story, unless you have kids like me, you can still remember the point that it made. That's the kind of impact you want your stories to have. Every point you make should be anchored by some kind of illustration. I use 4 kinds of anchors in almost every speech I give, and I call these my 4 A's for anchors, because they all begin with an A. The first A is an anecdote. That's a story. Again, when people remember your story, they remember your point. The next A is an activity. When people remember your activity or recall it, they remember the point that was attached to it. So listen to this live example of a quick, just a very quick activity I do with my audience. Stand up. This is what I want you to do. I just want you to put your right arm straight out like so. And I want you to keep it absolutely parallel to the ground. Now I want you to take your right thumb and your right index finger, put them together like so, making sure that your arm is absolutely parallel to the ground. Okay, now as fast as you can, without hurting yourself, I want you to take your right thumb and your right index finger and put it on your chin. Now turn to your neighbor and say, that's not your chin. Be seated, be seated. You know what, District 1, I just realized, I hate to break the news to you, but you got a few cheaters in here. You do. You have a few people who are like here, and they say, yeah, I was here, man, I was here. No, you weren't. I got you. And by the way, those of you up here, I have no idea what was going on. Well, you say, what is this about, Craig? You playing Simon Says? No. Actions speak louder than words. You didn't do as I said, you did as I did. Is that right? All right, if that's right, let me hear you. When I point you, I want you to say, oh, yeah. Was that right? Oh, yeah. One more time. Is that right? Oh, yeah. Turn to your neighbor and say, I know that's right. I'm sure I have to apologize that you couldn't see exactly what was happening here, but you were still able to pick up the point that the activity made, right? When they remember that activity, they'll remember that actions speak louder than words. So you have your anecdote, you have your activity. The third one is an analogy. Most speeches can easily incorporate an analogy to help it become memorable. Listen to this quick 30-second clip of an analogy that I use. We have to be responsible for the energy of our environment, and we have to stay away from being or fostering the crabs in a barrel mentality. Do you know what I'm talking about, right? See, I'm from Maryland. What are we known for? Now, you're from Maryland, too. You take live crabs and put them in a barrel, then you take the lid off of the top of the barrel. What's going to happen to the crabs? Right. Exactly. Every time a crab tries to crawl out, another one will claw at it and bring it back down. At least Maryland crabs. Every time, Virginia, too. Every time a crab tries to crawl out, another one will claw at it and bring it back down, claw at it and bring... Same exact thing negative people do. Welcome back. So you have your anecdote, your activity, your analogy. When people remember your analogy, they remember the point. Finally, you can use an acronym to make your point. I could use GROW, for example, G-R-O-W. The G would stand for something, and then the R would stand for something else. The O would stand for something. The W would stand for something. The key to a tight message is to make sure that it's tied to these anchors. Again, I usually use all 4 of these types of anchors in one 30 to 45-minute speech. And this mix of anchors also helps to keep the energy high, because variety is the spice of life and speeches. Remember, what's loose is lost, but what's tight stays in sight. I'll talk to you next week. Until then, keep speaking up. Keep speaking up.